We will be recording the session. There we go. We will be recording the session, and I'm sure it's going to be covered by some of the trade press. So good morning, everybody. I hope you're all well. Thank you so much for joining our first ABC webinar of the year. Those of you that have been on our webinars before, you know that it's myself. I'm the B. I've got Ami and we've got Claire, the ABC. I'm the Managing Director of Basha Kolosinska. Some of you know me as Barbara, but no one really calls me that anymore. It's Basha. MD of C&M Travel Recruitment. Bit of background on C&M. 27 years old this month. We work with all sectors of the travel industry, all disciplines, all levels. I'm sure we've worked with many of you. I know we've placed some of you and so on. Those of you that attended our ABC live event at the Barclays offices last September, thank you so much. And there's going to be more about our next ABC event soon. Okay, so today's topic, we're going to be combating the subject of ageism in the travel industry. Does it exist? What sort of experiences have we had? And of course, with my esteemed panel, we have got some fantastic knowledge from a law and from an HR perspective. And I've obviously got some statistics from a recruitment perspective. We'll obviously be monitoring the chat in the Q&A, so there's a chat box at the bottom, but this is really open, everybody. We really want people to be interactive, not just us talking at you. So put your hand up. If you want to put some comments in the chat, we'll keep an eye on that between us, won't we, Ami and Claire? And obviously then we can move on to Q&As at the end. So that's an introduction from me, and then so that's me, Ash from C&M, also on the board of ITT, on Institute of Travel and Tourism. I'm then going to put you onto my A. Over to you, Ami, to introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. Hopefully I don't need much of an introduction. I am an employment lawyer who acts solely for the travel industry. I work at the niche law firm Travlaw. Recognise a lot of familiar faces here and some new ones, so nice to be joining you this morning.
Thank you. A, over to C.
That'll be me. Hi, everyone. Yeah, hopefully, again, most of you will know me. Claire Steiner. I am a freelance HR and talent professional, but spend a lot of time working on two major initiatives, ITT Future You. I, like Basha, I'm on the board of the ITT, but I founded Future You 15 years ago, and we've reached about 36,000 students around the UK, bringing industry and education together. I also work on a global educational partnership, introducing young people around the world to this fabulous sector that we work in. I'm an advisory board member for Women in Travel. I work very closely with Best Workplaces in Travel. Morning, Gail. I see you're on here. Lovely to see you.
Hi, Gail.
And yes, and a few other bits and bobs. But my passion is all around people and talent. And obviously that's what this industry is all about. So looking forward to a lively discussion this morning.
Absolutely. And those of you that have joined us, if it's possible, please put your cameras on so we can see you. It makes it a much nicer, more interactive session. I do have some stats, but I'm going to throw the stats in as we sort of go on. But we actually have a poll, and the first poll we have got, actually one poll at the end, at beginning, one poll at the end. It's a simple question. You see that? Can you all see that? Yeah? Do you think ageism exists in the travel industry? Wow. We'll stop there. No, it's carrying on. I think we're pretty much done. 70-30. Okay. Interesting stat, maybe? Okay. End the poll. Share the results. There we go. So, Claire, let's go on to you from an HR perspective. Ageism, HR in the industry. Over to you.
Well, I think first I want to clarify that ageism for me is not just about what I think traditionally people think it's very much about the older workforce. But actually for me, this is about all ages. And whether or not people are, I guess, maybe unconsciously discriminated against because of their age, because of maybe a perception of too much experience, lack of experience, people's opinions about when people want to retire, people's opinions about when they came into the workforce and how much experience they've got. And actually, so I think this is much bigger for that. I think another point I want to make around this is that also we have to remember that there are 4 generations of people in the workplace now. Now, that is a really exciting thing, right? I think that's really, really exciting. However, that also creates a huge amount of issues and opportunities. So I'd like to I think those are some things I'm hoping we'll discuss this morning. For me, do I think ageism exists? I sit on the fence slightly, and I know that sounds like I'm backing out, but actually I do believe that some companies are very proactive and are very good in doing that. But I do believe there's still an awful lot of unconscious bias. Now, I am a woman in very much Generation X. I'm getting older myself. Yes, I work for myself, but I deal with a lot of businesses, and I have to challenge a lot of their recruitment choices when they are looking for new talent. We have a huge issue at the moment with talent. It's an ongoing issue. So we should be embracing all aspects and all ages into the workplace, because we know, and there's a lot of stats that prove it, that a mixed workforce, be it from an age perspective, any form of diversity, it benefits our business. That can be a challenge for slightly smaller businesses, I think, or the perceived challenge for smaller businesses. But again, I think that opening yourself to maybe different types of people in your business can actually improve your workforce. So that's kind of where I'm coming from this morning. That's just my first sort of starter for 10.
Yeah. And Claire, just a quick question on that, because we're talking about the fact that there's ageism at all levels. We're not just talking about people over 50 like me and most of us here, but the younger sort of side of it as well. Do you think it's more at the top level, if you've experienced it with all your clients have ever experienced it, or at the bottom level, as in the ages?
Okay, I'm going to try and be a little bit politically correct maybe here. I think the one thing you've got to remember is that there's a pyramid in all careers, right? And that actually the more senior jobs, there's less of them at the top of them. And actually traditionally, older people tend to work their way up to the top. So actually, if people are looking at the same level, there's going to traditionally be less jobs to go for. We don't have a hugely flat horizontal structures in most business. So there's that side of it. I do believe that more ageism does exist for the older workforce. I think particularly those who maybe are nearer the traditional retirement age, sort of 65 to 67. However, I believe that there are companies
at the lower level.
That happens at the lower level. And again, I think that's a real pity, because workforces should learn from each other, and I'm sure we'll talk about mentoring, but there's a lot of reverse mentoring goes. You get younger people in your business, they will teach a lot of older people staff. You get older people who will teach a lot of the younger people that information, and everyone should learn from each other. So I think it's really healthy to encourage that. I do think also there is an unconscious bias towards older people, that some people actually might just want to step back from levels of responsibility, but they still want to work, right?
Absolutely.
They still want to have a good career and a job, but they don't necessarily want to have the same levels of responsibility and seniority that they had. And a lot of businesses find it really hard to get their heads around that.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you've seen it, Basha, where people go, oh, they're just too senior. They can't.
Absolutely. And they've got so much to offer.
Yeah.
And they've still got the drive and the energy and the experience. Absolutely. And something that you said, obviously, at the older, shouldn't say that because I am older, the more mature level, we know that some candidates do feel that they are being discriminated against, but 81% of professionals over the age, this comes from Hayes, so it's not just within the travel industry, 81% of professionals over the age of 50 feel their chance of securing a role has been diminished because of their age. And that's over 50, right? That's not even over 60. That's 50, like the new 30. So it's quite interesting, isn't it, that stats there.
Yeah, and I just, again, I think that's just a real shame, because we have an aging population. There are more older people out there, less young people coming on. Of course, we want to get the fresh talent. Of course, we want to do that. But actually, that fresh talent will learn a lot from the people above them, just as we all did. Right, just as we all did. So it's really healthy to have that. I think from the older person's perspective, I think a lot of that, and hopefully we can get some comments. I know we've got a couple of people who've got experience of this, of how they sell themselves into businesses, and how they actually put themselves out there. Because again, I think, you know, you can turn the dial. A lot of this is unconscious bias, and I think
it's subjective, isn't it? It's subjective. And the employment rate for those age, because we just keep at 50. Why are we 50? Why are we not talking about 60 and 70?
I know.
The employment rate for those aged between 50 and 64 has risen from 31% in 1992 to 42% in 2020, and it's expected to hit 47%. So the employment rate of people up to 64, up to 47% in 2030, because we're all living longer, so therefore people are going to want to work.
There's economic benefits. We've got an aging population, and this, you only have to look at what's happening with state retirement ages. You know, they're going to go up to 68 by 2044, but I actually think the government are going to bring that date forward to about 2037. So there's no denying it, but it's interesting, you know, when we talk about age discrimination, the Equality Act does not define what age is. So it can be at the older end, and it can be at the younger end, and it can be anything in the middle. And it's really important to remember that up until 2010, age discrimination was not a protected characteristic. It's only been around as a protected characteristic for the last 15 years, whereas you go back to the 70s and compare it to things like race and sex discrimination. And the reason that the government brought it in, because they recognised that people were living and older, in which case people would have to work older and whatnot.
Do you think, working with many clients as you, Claire, and myself do, does it exist? Does ageism exist?
Well,
bar the unconscious bias, does it exist?
Yes. And the reason why, I'm going to give you a really interesting and shocking statistic that I got my trainer to do a little bit of research for me, and I said, have you made a mistake here? Have you dropped a figure? So the Ministry of Justice, so, you know, a good source of where to get statistics from, they published some findings. Okay. In 2022 to 2023, the average age discrimination compensation award was £14,000. Okay. Contrast that to the following year, 23 to 24, there's been a 624% increase, and the average award in that year was £103,000. So that's not a small jump, it's a massive jump. We don't have the figures for 24, 25, because obviously we're not at the end of the financial year. But the outcome of that report was that the UK working population, and indeed employers in the UK, are perversely ageist. Okay, so that's pretty strong words. And just to give you an example of one of the higher awards in age discrimination that have been made in recent times. So this chap was dismissed, and as part of the dialogue, he was called an old fossil, and he didn't know how to deal with millennials. And the firm had introduced a policy not to recruit anyone over the age of, wait for this, 45 years old. Okay, so he did work for a FTSE 250 company, so he was a high earner, but in that particular case, the compensation that he was awarded was £3.2 million. Okay, so those are the cases that are making the headlines. But given the fact that the average award now is last year was £103,000, I think employers have to tackle this. We've got an aging population, and these high value claims will continue and be more frequent unless you as a business have got your head round how to deal with ageism.
Yeah. There's I'm just looking at the comments. I don't know if you two girls are as well. Guy, it's Guy. Many unconsciously discriminating on an age basis. It's so common, people don't realise they're behaving that way. Absolutely, and that goes on to the unconscious bias. Mel, this is great. Mel's business works so much better with a mixture of young and old. Totally agree, because you've got a different personalities, experience, skill sets, and so on, energy and so as well. Young and old both have so much to offer and add so much value to her business. Gail, totally agree. By 2030, over 50s will make up half of the workforce because we're all living longer. And I love this as well, Gail. Let's retire the word retirement.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Love that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to touch on that in terms of what you can and cannot do in terms of age. So should I just talk a bit about the Equality Act?
Yeah.
Okay. So as I said, this came into force in 2010. So we've had age discrimination as a protected characteristic for around 15 years. Broadly, you can't discriminate against someone because of their age. There are limited circumstances where you can discriminate against someone because of their age. So it would be, I don't know, you need a child actor. Clearly, you can't get an adult to play that role, so that would be okay. Or sometimes, you have certain age brackets, or you reward someone with extra holiday after so many years service. So you can have that sort of criteria if it's a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. So to encourage loyalty, fine. Rewarding experience, fine. Sometimes for health and safety issues, you might not want a 90-year-old pilot driving a Boeing 747, for example. But it's really important to remember that when we talk about age discrimination, it's not just limited to who you have employed. It also applies to job applicants. So it's very much front and centre of the whole recruitment stage as well. So generally, don't use age as a factor in determining who you're going to employ. It speaks to reason. Shouldn't be used as a criteria, and try and pull back from using words like mature, youthful, recent graduate in the advert or in the recruitment process, because they are steering you towards a potential age discrimination claim. Okay.
I want to add something to that. Sorry, can I just add a stat there? From a recruitment perspective, and I'll talk about from as a recruiter and what we find with our clients, but just some statistics here that show that nearly half, 45% of all UK companies have now introduced anonymisation, is that how I pronounce it? Anonymisation into stages of the recruitment process to mitigate any bias, and 54% of UK companies provide unconscious bias training to their hiring managers and interviewers, which is the way we want to go.
And that's the brilliant segue onto what was going to be my next point, which is remove.
We've practiced, isn't it? And we actually haven't.
Remove age from the application forms. You do not need it there. Yeah. It's fine to have it as part of your diversity monitoring, and that's a separate form that HR will see. You've got to remove, because straight away, if somebody doesn't get a job and they are of a certain age bracket, they will turn around and say, oh, it's because of my age. And then you're going to be on the back foot and trying to have to prove it, because they will turn around and say, well, why did you ask for my age? You've used it as a factor. And the other thing, and this applies both to people who are looking for jobs and also in application forms, don't ask for dates of education or qualifications. Focus on the skills and the abilities and the qualities that you want in the role. So, I think one of the questions that we will come up, or we were going to get asked, is, how do you deal with it as a job applicant? Just put X company, what you contributed, what your skills were, your responsibilities. You don't need to put I worked there from 1973 to 1975. It doesn't really matter. It's what you did in that role. And I think there's also a trend nowadays that, maybe even going back as far as 10 years ago, if someone had jumped a lot on their CV, you'd think, oh, they're not suitable, they're a bit unstable, they've got personal issues. All that unconscious bias would kick in. But now, with remote working, with hybrid working, with the new generations that are coming into the workplace, those stereotypes are dying down a little bit. So that's what I want to say about recruitment. But also, I just want to dovetail into a few other elements of the employment world. Promotion and training. Clearly, don't you give preferential treatment on grounds of age. It's going to lead you straight into a claim. Redundancy. Don't assume or work on the basis that the people who are the oldest are probably going to be more likely to want to be made redundant. Don't use age as a factor, okay? And then retirement. this is an age-old question that I
We're going
get
to
asked.
retirement. We're not using, we have to think of a new word as an industry.
Okay, well, when the audience have thought of that word, I'll use it. But I'll just use retirement. So default retirement ages, they were abolished in 2011, soon after the Equality Act came into play. Okay, so you'll typically previously have seen in contracts of employment, our company default retirement age is 65. You should not put that into your contracts. You should not have a default retirement age because they are extremely hard to justify. Okay. Default retirement ages for companies and employers is very different to state retirement ages. We've already touched on that. You know, women and men now have the same retirement age. Proposals to go up to 68 by 2037, I think. So just because there's a state retirement age doesn't mean that you as employers can say to an employee, right, you're hitting state retirement age, you need to retire from the business. You can't do that. What you need to do is have ongoing dialogue, conversations, two-way conversations, and encourage a bit of openness and transparency about long-term future aims. Because somebody might turn around and say, well, actually, I do want to step down and do this role, or actually, I only want to do this many days, or, you know. So you've got to have that communication going on. You can't just go to somebody and say, right, you know, you're hitting retirement age. Have you thought about winding down? Or, you know, you can't have those conversations in that such a way. So that's a very, very, very quick whistle-stop tour, certain aspects of where age discrimination claims could arise, okay? But fundamentally, you know, when we talk about diversity, age is very much front and center of having a diverse workforce. It's not just about race or disability or, you know, representing certain communities. Having a diverse workforce will make you more profitable, okay? So when we talk about age, it might be bringing young, fresh experiences into the workplace. Now, that doesn't mean fresh experience means people straight out of university. You might have someone who's got 30 years of experience working somewhere else of a, you know, more older age who can bring that to the table as well.
Absolutely.
So it works always. I think the interesting challenge moving forward and where some age discrimination claims may arise is the mix of the intergenerational workforce, which, you know, is happening. I think, Owen, you've got a really interesting slide because I always forget which generation is which.
Yeah, I was going to put that on at the beginning, actually, Owen. Let's and we've got some comments. I'm going to go into the comment box in a sec as well.
Yeah, just an age memoir.
Just in case everybody. I mean, do we all know the various? Does it come up? There we go. I can see that. I've got two grey boxes, but
yeah, I don't know what those boxes are, but yeah, but you can read what that is, and I think, you know, for me, yes, you've got those 4 generations there. Generation Alpha, they are heading our way really soon. And you know, the betas generation, the next generation, the betas or the betas, they're being born this year. So, you know, it's there's only 20 years, right?
Yeah.
In each of those, and so you've got to really think about it. But that's a useful slide, I think, just to remind people. But also, if you look at the numbers there, you can already see the aging population.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's decreasing, isn't it? It's decreasing.
Yeah.
The oldest 3 generations have got the most in there. So,
yeah.
And we're lasting longer. Can I just pick up on something, actually, Ami? And I know we can stop sharing now. Thanks, Owen. We'll send that to everybody. I'm just going to go to the chat box, but I've also got a point on CV. So Gail made another very good point. This is about the bottom line, about the huge demographic shifts in our society and in the talent pool, which far too few companies are thinking about. And I agree. It's not just the travel industry. It's the whole country. Chelsea, this is a really good point. Read the dates on a CV, and we still look for dates on a CV when we're reading CVs, because it also does give you an idea of how long somebody has been there. And I appreciate that we don't want the old way of looking at CVs, that if someone's a job hopper, they've been there 3 years, they move on, we don't really have that school of thought anymore. However, it still gives a good idea of how what they did at that particular company and so on. So it's
hang on, sorry, Bash, to interject you. The dates are not going to tell you what they did at that company.
No. Yeah, absolutely. And obviously their skills, their achievements, and so on. But Chelsea made a really, really good point. Read the dates. There may be a need for them for referencing purposes. Maybe not so far back, but at least the newer roles.
Yes, but that's done once the offer of the job has been made, not during the recruitment process. And that's a distinction.
When she put in how often, someone comes to me, they work for me at C&M, I'd put the dates they worked for us here.
Yeah, but the point is there, if you've got a 20-year history of work, realistically, you're going to go back to the last employer, maybe the employer before that. You're not going to go back to who they worked for in 1972, are you?
Absolutely.
So
yeah, that's a very good point.
I do think CVs are changing slightly. I do think the way, and certainly what we're teaching the younger people at universities and colleges is around, as we all know, it's about making sure that their skills, their experience, and their transferable skills match the jobs, and they can sell themselves in that way. Because a lot of them, obviously, we have, Ami was making the point about people who've got 40, 50 years work experience, but then you've got, younger people who maybe have only had a part-time job, but that doesn't mean that they don't have some experience, because that is experience in itself.
Or that they've got something fantastic to offer.
Yeah.
Which brings us, these
segues. I just want to very quickly carry on with this referencing thing. I think, when this is something that I push into the businesses I work with, how important it is to get references, right? Most references these days will just confirm that they work there. And actually, that's all you need to know, because that covers you off, right? So you're actually looking at them to say that, because, and I certainly will just do a confirmation this person worked here, this was their job, and they left because they resigned, or they left because, they got off another job, whatever it is. So there's that side of it. But also your offer letters, therefore, must make sure that offers are subject to references being received, because again, you can get yourself into all sorts of legal problems. If you're giving them an offer, you then do a reference, it comes back, and you decide you want to withdraw the offer. And actually, if you haven't just put that one phrase in there, I mean, you can still get out of it. I know Ami will talk us through this, but it just makes your life a lot easier if you just say this offer is subject to successful references.
And all you're trying to do there is verify that they have worked where they said they worked, because employers now, it is standard practice to give a factual reference, and that's because you've got a duty of care not to mislead the potential employer if you are giving a reference. So if you say too much and say, they were excellent at this and excellent at that, then we live in a litigious world. But completely echo, it's still a worthwhile exercise to do. I recently did a webinar for the Business Travel Association on due diligence in terms of the recruitment process, because there's been a few cases there where companies have gone unstuck because they haven't took references, and then there's been fraud going on, and then it transpires that this has happened at not just one company but the company before, and so on. So due diligence is really key, but it's not just references. We live in a very modern world. Social media will give you a lot of clues about
absolutely. If I can add something to that, so obviously from a referencing perspective, many of our clients, it's not a prerequisite, it's not on our terms that we do, but some of our clients do ask us to reference. And as we know, it's literally just like you said, Ami, it's literally dates, confirming dates, because they want to protect themselves. But because we are in such one degree of separation, it's quite incestuous, but everybody knows everybody. If I know a client well, and they work for you, Ami, and we're going to place them somewhere else, I would, and they're leaving you, I'd pick the phone up to you. Nothing written, I'd pick the phone up and say, Ami, what's this person like? Would you recruit them again? And because I trust you, and I trust many of my business partners so well, I would take that, and I can't document it. If it's a no, all I tell the potential the client who wants to take the candidate is I've had some information. I probably think that you shouldn't take this person on, but obviously you can't pass on what the information is.
There's ways
That's
and
okay,
means.
Ami. Is that
Yeah.
okay to do?
Yeah, there's ways and means, and it's pretty much what I said in the other webinar that I did, which was such a close industry. Everybody knows somebody who works at another company, and if you're on good terms, there's nothing to stop you doing that.
Absolutely. And likewise, actually, we've had a couple of experiences here where the client was a little bit concerned about taking the candidate on because an existing member of staff had heard bad things about this person. I think they'd worked with them before or something like, oh, they're a bit troublemaking, they're a bit militant. So we went to their previous employer, picked the phone up and said, what are they really like? Because this person's saying rah, rah, rah. And they're like, no, absolutely not. They just didn't get on. They just didn't get on. The person we ended up placing is just really competitive, very good at their job. And the other person where this feedback came from was just negative about them. So you have to almost take it a little bit with not a pinch of salt, but you have to sort of read between the lines, don't you? Sometimes when you're taking these sort of subjective opinions.
I wanted to add very quickly, though, I think you also have to recognise that just because someone doesn't fit one company doesn't mean they're not going to be a really good fit for yours.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
So I think, and I think if you're talking to a friend, they hopefully should recognise that, because it is sometimes people just aren't a good fit. It doesn't mean they're not completely capable of doing their job, but they're just not in the right position or in the right business. So I think you have to also reflect on that. What I would say, just on your point, though, I think, there's, to me, though, there's still a little bit of okay, so we're now about to place this person in a company with a person that they didn't get on with before, and if it's a small business, they're going to have exactly the same problems again. So I think there's a little bit of a dilemma going on there, but that's just my comment to that.
And I agree about the companies. Basha Kolosinska might work great for company A, might fit into the culture, the visions and so on, but not for company B, and we find that all the time. Valentina Pina, I hope I pronounced that correctly, talking about young talent. I found more difficult to recruit young talent because of their general attitude. This is an interesting one, which I knew this would probably come up. They often apply for positions that require more experience. Interesting. And whenever I decide to give the chance, they wouldn't really focus on learning from more experienced employees. I feel there is a lack of commitment in the younger generation, but I really believe in the benefits of having ages cooperating and exchanging skills. Yeah.
I think this is where the intergenerational issue is front and centre, isn't it? Because, Generation X and what their expectations are of the workplace are very different to millennials, and there's always that clash. And, we've said this before, that years ago, you'd go into an interview and it would be, my employer says jump, I'll say how high. That's reversed now. Employees, particularly of a younger generation, are going in with their demands and their wish lists. And that's how, this conundrum of how we deal with that intergenerational workforce is not by any stretch of the imagination being resolved. And Claire, I think
a number of things. I think you said a word there which I always use, which is expectations. So I think one is that management of expectations for when they come in, what's expected of them, what you are expecting, these things around probationary periods and training periods and what they're expected to do happens within that. I think having buddy systems works really well for businesses, particularly if you buddy them up with a slightly older person. What I would say, and this is something that anyone who works with me knows I'm a big fan of, the more you deal with young people before they get into the workplace, the better you're going to help advise them and influence them. So if you have opportunities to give young people work experiences, be they at college level or when they're at university, maybe years work experience, you are helping equip them with more knowledge when they get back into the workplace. Time and time again, I'm in Belfast next week, and I'm doing a panel of young people who are currently on work experience at their university. And one of the questions I will ask them is, what have you learned the most? What did you wish you knew before you started? Because a lot of them, this is brand new for them. So we have to manage those expectations. The generation, we call them Zillennials, we call them the iGen, I call them the Zoomers as well, who grew up on this sort of, the Zoom generation. I think they need our help. Right? They do need our help to help integrate them, just as we needed help, but it's a very different world. So you have to manage those expectations. You have to get them to see the benefits of working and learning from people who already have experience. We have to listen to them, but you know what? The rhetoric is changing as well, because of changes in the demographic. You know, a year ago, it was very much an employee market. That is changing. It is becoming more of an employer market. Young people are getting more nervous about finding roles, and I'm hearing this all the time. You know, they're worried about getting those jobs and that sort of thing. So for me, I think it's about that, managing those expectations, and where you can engage with them as early as possible to give them better understanding of what to expect when they're in the workplace, and to give them a bit of a reality sound check about, you know, yes, of course we're going to listen to you, but you know what, you might think you want to work remotely 100% of the time, but actually when you're starting off, you need to have a bit more hand holding. I know absolutely. We've got Guy on the call, and Guy, we'll have opinions on that, but I just think, you know, there are certain things that we have to take ourselves back to when we were that age, and remember how much we learnt when we first stepped into the workplace.
I just wanted to use a football analogy, if I may. So I think there's some football fans on here, but not maybe all. A multi-generational workforce is always going to be the best. And you look at the recent England squad, you know, people have said, why has he brought Jordan Henderson back in? He's 34 years old, because he recognises that you can't just run a football team with youth, and you can't just run it with experience. You've got to have that balance of old and young to get the best out of a team. And I think that sort of analogy works really well in the workplace, that the more diverse your workforce is, not just in terms of age, the more profitable you will be, because you can pivot and turn in accordance with business demands.
Yeah. And I totally agree with that. I think I get your point, Valentina. I don't think all young people have that necessarily got that attitude. And we've got some more stats here. I think we started at the beginning saying it's not just about the older generation that feel discriminated against, but on the younger side, from an age discrimination point of view, over 1 in 4, almost 30% of those aged between 18 and 24 say they've been discriminated against when job hunting. And 1 in 5, 20% of those between 25 and 34 say they've discriminated against when looking for a job. From a recruitment perspective, when we are searching for candidates for our clients, if our clients say, I don't want anybody over 50, they have to be, we straight away push back and say, it's about the right person for the job. You can't discriminate against age. Oh, well, they're going to be tired and not have any energy as well. Hang on a minute, I'm 54 and I've got more energy than a lot of 24-year-olds. So it's about the person, and vice versa. You could get somebody who's 24 who doesn't have the energy. So it's all about the right person and the right skill and the right fit for the company.
It's all about unconscious bias, isn't it? And if you rewind back or think back, oh, we're not going to recruit women between the ages of 25 and maybe 37.
They're going to have a baby.
They're going to have a baby. So it's not just in relation, you know, it's quite a wide issue, but it's recognising the unconscious bias kicking in. And I think, you know, training on that really is something that a lot of employees are undertaking. And, you know, if you're not, I would strongly urge you to consider doing that.
So what else can we do to eliminate and to reduce ageism happening, or have we covered it all? Eliminating unconscious bias, taking out date of birth, states. What else?
I think if I can answer from an HR perspective, I mean, we've talked about recruitment and you know, hiring practices and that sort of thing. So I think, you know, that needs to be promoted from within the companies, and people like yourself, Bash, will have a real opportunity to help train and educate your clients in that.
Absolutely. Which we do.
I think, you know,
we do. Yeah.
Sorry, I mentioned earlier about mentorship programs. And actually, I do think this is hugely important, and this can really help. So a lot of people have buddy systems, but having mentorship programs where older and younger people will share knowledge, and you know, and also mixing the teams and mixing the groups so that people get the opportunity to learn each other, and that will help break down those biases that people will have once they're even in the workplace. You're still going to have these biases, you know. Certainly, of course, you think that because you're like my mum, or you know, of course, you think that because you don't understand because you're too young, you know, and And I think, again, having these opportunities to bring people together is really, really important. Obviously, it's important that all your, and covers off Ami's point about all your discrimination policies incorporate ageism in there, and you make that really strong, and people know that and have an understanding of that. But it's things like, you can, if you're big enough, you can have workshops around unconscious bias. And Ami talked about, equal benefits and making sure that you're not discriminating through your benefits scheme. But I think also there's this learning and development side of it, which is really important. And, we offer learning programs. And just because you're training a young person in a new way you're training things doesn't mean you shouldn't incorporate and have the older people doing it as well, because yes, they might just be learning or relearning or updating themselves on what's going on, but they will be able to contribute to those learning situations as well. And again, it gives them, the younger people, the opportunity to understand the benefit of having these older people around them that they can ask questions to. So for me, it's about encouraging communication and opportunities for these people to actually talk together and learn together. So those would be mine.
It's worth mentioning that apprenticeships are not just for young people as well.
Yeah.
I think that's a common misconception. And you might get someone who's been in the workforce for 20 odd years, in a very intense senior role, but until you have a dialogue with them, you won't know what they want, and they might want to take a side step or a step down. They might not necessarily have all the skills, but there might be an apprenticeship on, I don't know, AI or whatever out there to enable them to carry on doing this new role for the next 5-10 years. So, I can't emphasize enough about, don't just assume that people are going to stay in the same job until the day that they choose to retire. There's lots of options available.
And speaking as someone who's the oldest of the ABC, I would absolutely say that, as you get older, you're very aware that actually it's really good for you to learn new things as well as an older person.
I was about to say the same.
You should never stop learning about AI and learning all these tech things. And yes, I'll ask a younger person. I'm quite happy to ask a younger person that I help with that. And again, I think it's just us as an age and work group giving going forth, if you like, almost with an olive branch to the younger generation and saying, you guys know this, I don't, but in the same respect, that hopefully opens the doors for them to turn that around and say, you know this and I don't, or what would you have done in this situation? So again, I'm just going to say it all the time, it's all about communication and giving opportunities for these young people to work together. And so many people on the chat have said, they promote a diverse age workforce, and it really benefits their business. So proof's in the pudding, isn't it?
Proof's in the pudding, exactly.
But Guy has asked a question. I don't know if you see that.
He always asks me a nice legal question, so thank you, Guy, for that. Can you legally deliberately recruit older workers on the basis of achieving a more age diverse?
Great question.
On the face of it, that would be age discrimination. However, you may be able to justify it if it's a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim, and that's what you'd have to justify. So it may be that as part of one of your business objectives that you need to bring in some more experience, for example. The converse of that would be succession planning, where you say we need to bring some people in of a certain younger age. So on the face of it, no, but potentially yes, if you can justify it as a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim.
There are some other questions on Chelsea, I think, is just making points. They've rolled out a successful manager apprentice program, and the comment had always been, oh, but I'm not young. Can I still do it then? Because what you said there, Claire. Mel, we can promote the benefits of the day in the life of. We have lots of positive stories of how mixed workforce can benefit the individual and the company. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Chelsea's got the successful.
And I think it's important to remember that the ABC here are not the font of all knowledge here.
Oh.
You guys will have information, exercises, experiences that you have used, and this forum is not just about us. So, please do share in the comments, or if you want to turn on your mic and share what you've done.
I was gonna say that. I think, if there's questions, or if you want to, I know that Guy, you sent in a point, but I think we've covered it, and Liam did, and Chris Oakes as well. We'd like to hear some stories, some experiences, negative and maybe positive as well, and how to overcome that, because we're not we are by no means the oracle, but hopefully from a
I'm just interested on a point I made earlier around, the older people, as we get older, some of us do actually want to slow down a bit. We don't want to be in that sort of, that top level, high end job.
Yeah.
Yes, obviously we miss the salary, but actually the older you get, hopefully, the more, financially comfortable you become. She says famous last words, I'm self-employed, I'm never going to be that. But I think there are. I remember I was on a plane, and I've told the Basher and Ami this story before. I was on a plane, I was chatting, as we all do, to the cabin crew. It was a lovely, more mature lady, and it was just post the pandemic. And I said, we were having a bit of an issue with a couple of clients, and so I was chatting away, and we were laughing. And she said, "Oh, I love this job, even when this happens." So I said, "Oh, how long?" And she said, "Oh, I've been doing it for years." She said, "But I retired just before the pandemic. I retired." And I said, and then I spent the pandemic kind of doing voluntary work, and then I got out of the pandemic, and I was so bored. So I went and I rang up this very well-known airline, and I said, "Can I come back part-time?" And they brought me back, and I'm back in the air 2 to 3 days a week. I've never been happier. And she was 68 years old. And she was great, right? And and I'll tell you what, one of the things that I've said to her was, she handled those people, those disruptive passengers, so well, right? She just knew what she was doing, and she handled them brilliant, which is kind of how our conversation started. And she was all about promoting the life of cabin crew to young people. And she said, "Oh, I chatted to this girl in the shop the other day who was dealing with a difficult client, and said she should come and work with me." And so there are some amazing people out there like that. And I think companies just miss the point if they don't embrace that. And I think I think we all know one big company that does this is B&Q, right? They actively allow for older people to come and work for them, people who have retired, who maybe just want to keep themselves active. And it's been hugely successful for them. And I'd love to see more of that in our industry. But I do think, there is still an issue around older people, if they want to stick in that sort of more senior role, because there are less senior roles and companies maybe are looking for the bright young sparks coming through. There's some unconscious bias still happening and ageism happening there. But I appreciate everyone's
talking of
comments.
older, Chris Oakes. Chris might want to speak in a minute, but Chris Oakes has said, will older potential employees be looking for a higher salary as more experienced, as they've got more experience, that actually potentially can be discriminated by age and cost effectiveness?
Yeah.
So go on.
Ultimately, they might be expecting a higher salary,
but they're not going to get it.
Yeah, it's for the employer to decide what the salary is that goes with the job. So, that's a choice for you to decide whether you want to apply for that or not.
And a good example of that would be if you have been an MD for a tour operator and you're moving and you're 58 and you want to go to a head of ops role. Yes, you might have been paid XYZ as an MD, but you're not going to be paid that. The salary is going to mirror what the role. It will probably be the top end because you'll have a lot of experience, but it's not going to be exactly what you were paid before because it's a different job.
Yeah.
Hope that answers, Chris. It's all right. Hope that answers your question. Sorry, Ami.
That's okay. I was just going to pick the question above from Libby, which is the same point that I made to Guy, which is, so she asks, many companies look at an over 50s recruitment drive. Is that potentially ageist? Yes, it is. You might be able to justify it if you can show that you are trying to, using a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. But then, Ed, we're going on a segue here about getting people to come in, recruiting people to work in the office.
Speak to Guy.
Guys, or Guys, your man on that one.
I mean, Ed, I think, I think this is a situation for a lot of smaller operators who aren't based in a bigger city. But actually, I think it's where you have to look for what I call the hidden talent. And the hidden talent is often people from a more diverse backgrounds. So, and within that are people who are older, maybe people who are neurodiverse, maybe people who are younger. You could engage with your local colleges to actually give opportunities for young people to do some work experience with you. That actually might then introduce them to your business so that when they come out into the workforce when they finish their qualifications. They might automatically come knocking on your door. That happens a lot if they've had a good experience with you, because it means they've already got that automatic sort of, leg through the door, if you like. And also, thinking about, I mentioned sort of people who maybe, and we saw this a lot, by the way, in COVID, people who retired, people who said, right, I've had enough. I've spent 2 years sitting around and I've worked out that actually I can have a nice lifestyle and I don't need to be working. And now going, actually, I quite like to, like the lady I was talking to, would like to go back, but maybe on a part-time basis. So you need to kind of look out for people like that in your local area. So it may be that you have to think differently about the types of people you want to recruit and are traditionally recruited into those roles, thinking about maybe job shares, thinking about more flexible working patterns. Guy, I'm sure, will be talking that, give you some great examples of people who work remotely as well. And sorry, Guy, I'm conscious you've had your hand up.
Guy's raised his hand.
I'll shut up now.
Guy, unmute yourself. Can't see you. Oh, there you are, top left.
There you go. Yes, yeah, I couldn't resist. On the homeworking front. So, I mean, homeworking really doesn't just address all the obvious stuff, but I think it's specifically relevant in terms of this. We're talking about age, because the ONS currently says that hybrid and home working is more popular amongst the older age groups. And as we know, the term older seems to be coming down to a ridiculously low level. So organisations that do make more of an effort to embrace home working, which is considerably more than, yes, we'll allow it. There's a whole cultural communication piece, which I'm sure Claire can talk more about, in terms of the differences between how you lead and manage a remote-based workforce. But if you do want to encourage older workers, then those organisations that embrace home working are going to be able to attract and keep.
Well, you've got a bigger pool of talent to search from, rather than having to be able to commute to your offices, as you know.
Yeah. So I think there is a clear link between trying to attract, as we do, older workers, and we have been known to place job recruitment adverts in websites where older workers read. I have to be very careful about not being discriminatory against those at the younger end of the workforce, but I can put a lot of ticks against those old codgers over 30, and we definitely look to recruit them, but they're working from home.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm just looking at the questions. Liam, I can't see where you are. I don't know if you've I hope we've answered your questions in the session, Liam. Just make a note or unmute yourself if you have any other questions. Chris, I know that you've got quite an interesting story, really. Do you want to share it with us?
Yeah, I was going to do it just before I go for my 12 o'clock nap, because I'm nearly 60. Yeah, I'll be 60 next year. I found myself during COVID, as we all did, quite a trying time. I was on working for a great company called Fairmine. We were up at really high results, looking at the future, and then it all went from hero to zero within 3 or 4 days. So there was no furlough. I made redundant, all very amicable. I like to think over my 38 years, I've always kind of left or left companies with a good copybook. And then I spoke to you, Basha, and you'd worked with a company I'd never heard about called Technomine, an outsourcing specialist. And 4 years, 7 months later, I'm now global sales director with them. And I reassessed my skill set with regards to outsourcing, and I've always embraced technology. And I'm one of the partners now, one of the shareholders. I'm 59, 38 years experience, but I've never kind of let it hold me back. I started with Club 1830, and now that's my date of birth. So I've just kind of embraced the change all the way through. And I think have you
experienced ageism? Obviously, you got that. I mean, whether it was lucky, and actually, you got placed just at the end of the pandemic, didn't we? I can't believe it. You're probably the only placement we made in about 2 years. But have you personally experienced it? Because you've had a few jobs since 1830.
Yeah, I mean, there's bits of it. you know, and you can make your CV a bit more vanilla to a certain extent, or you can go out all guns blazing and say, this is what I did. This is, you know, I'm going back to 88 when I started. You know, I don't mention as much of that, but it's still part of your DNA of your history of what makes you a travel professional. But it's building that network. But I always remember when I was at Air Tours and we had Golden Years hosts. So I was in my 30s then, and the Golden Years hosts were in the 60s, and ex-managing directors and people like that. And you to manage, and I always remember managing those people who came from very high earning, powerful jobs, which is why I'd asked about the salary aspect, to doing something that they loved, you know, walking around the Souks in Tunisia with, you know, headgear on and taking tourists around, and they absolutely loved it. And I think you remember that where you were at that stage in your life, and you take a block copy, and then you go to where you are now. And I think it is very much about the way that you value your team, and your team value you. So we've got about 700 employees now, sort of globally, and it's just what makes them work. And it's that thing of irrespective of race, creed, colour or age, you know, and embracing every demographic and who's best for the job. And I think if you live by that mantra and you deploy that mantra into what you do, and I've met people in the past as well that they can be quite bitter about their age, and you know, and I had, as you said before, I had this really high powered job, and I don't have it now, and I've had, you know, I've sent my CV off to 200 companies and not even get one reply, or I've been ghosted. That's unacceptable, but there might be a reason behind that, that maybe you're in denial about. So that's just my view. It might be right.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing, Chris. Thank you. Thank you. Has anybody got any more questions or comments they'd like to add? Either unmute yourself or make a comment. Hello, is that Mel?
Hi, Mel.
Mel.
Yeah, hi there. Hello everyone. I would just like to say, like here, I don't think we necessarily go out looking for specific people, but somehow we've managed to get a really diverse pool. We do go out and speak to the colleges and universities, and we do that on a regular basis. But I think we can kind of tick most boxes, you know, whether it's young or old. We've got neurodivergent people that are working here that are incredible. And from the day they've joined to where I'm speaking right now, they haven't made a single mistake or error because their attention to detail is off the Richter scale. So I would highly promote people in that category. We love people working in our office, and we do struggle, but also we've kind of reaped the benefits of being able to employ people that are now based in the north of England and working from home. In our ideal world, everyone would be in our office. It's a great place to be, but it doesn't always work. But I do believe that with younger people, it works so much better if they're surrounded by people and they can collaborate. You know, you overhear phone calls, you're listening to what other people are saying, and that's something that you can't find if you're working from home. But we embrace everything here, so I think it's kind of just giving everybody a chance. And when you were talking earlier about
No, you're still, we can still hear you.
Sorry. When you were talking earlier about people that had worked elsewhere and they weren't liked in the previous workplace, we've had that here. And I think actually if you just spend the time to get to know somebody, that a particular individual who I won't name, but it turns out that that person is actually autistic, and we've learned how to manage that. And so now, well, we're still learning, if I'm honest, but it's there was a common denominator to where this person worked everywhere before, but we've learned how to try and manage that. And actually, this person also is incredible at their job, like
that's amazing
at their
that
job.
You found that.
Yeah. But it's been a difficult transition, sort of, socially engaging that person with the rest of the team. But I think also it's about not being afraid to have like honest conversations. like if you suspect something, but it's tricky, you know, when someone maybe is not even aware of that themselves, and it's you that is kind of noticing this, and then how do you broach that conversation? We've kind of just sort of faced it head on and hope that, you know, we don't get taken to a tribunal for sort of commenting on something. But anyway, it's worked, and we're now, you know, can kind of put things in place to help them and everybody else. But it's difficult because you feel worried about, you know, saying something that maybe you shouldn't say.
Yeah. And what I would say, I think you'll find, Mel, I mean, you know, Blue Cube, you've got a fantastic workforce, and I know the company well, and proof is in the pudding and how well you do. So, and it's lovely to hear those stories. What I would say is a lot of the charities have got some really good, helpful tips and hints and advice of what you can and cannot do if you come across something that you think is the case. So if it's you go to the you know, the Autism Society, or it's mental health, you can go to Mind, and they've got some really useful tools. And if you don't have an HR person or a mental health officer, or, you know, a lot of businesses have those now, but the smaller businesses often don't have those resources, and there are resources out there that you know, they can find and get help on. But I think it's great that you are dealing with it, and you're right. You know what? Half the time when you actually sit down and bother to get to know someone and talk them through, you can completely change the,
really
you know, change.
And I think it's about when you mentioned about managing people's expectations. It's also managing your own expectations of, like, you know, who or what are you employing, you know? So managing your, you know, with some of the young people here, we just make sure we start off teaching them how to shake somebody's hand, so that when they go out, you know, that you know, because you get a 35-year-old person come in for the job and they give you a limp handshake, and it's not great, you know. It's all these first impressions. So it's about managing your own expectations about who it is that you've got coming into your business as well, and maybe not expecting too much, or, you know, whatever.
And I think, Mel, the point that you've raised about being present and physical in the office, you are going to learn those interpersonal skills, subliminal learning, you know, just listening to your colleagues on the phone. And that sort of addresses the question that Liam, you've put in the chat, which is a bit off topic, but it's interesting that if you have a homework for many years, that employees will not take you in a shop, as they say. You have, it might be employers take you into the shop. If you know face-to-face experience before the job, I mean, I had found that a continuous problem. I was suitable and experienced for the job, but I had worked at home. So it can work against you because, you know, some employers don't consider that you've been able to demonstrate those skills in a face-to-face situation. And I think when the pandemic broke out and this whole new concept world of hybrid working and remote working came along, you know, it was very much the view that you are less likely to get promoted if you are a full-time remote worker, because you're not there as visible as someone who's under the face of the manager who's present in the office.
And I think I'd also point out that the world of work is very different than it was when we were all starting out, and we have to accept that. We can't expect it to be the same, much as we know we benefited from it. But that doesn't mean that the new world of work isn't going to be beneficial to this next generation of workers. So I think, you know, we have to accept they want different things than we wanted. I think some of us might have been slightly pigeonholed into how things happen because that was how things were, and we were much more compliant. I think certainly I was, you know, in terms of my expectations in the workplace. And as Ami made the point earlier, you know, the next generation demand different things, as do the older generation, by the way. I think I will also say that the older generation, I think as a result of the younger generations being much more vocal about what they want, the older generation are now starting coming out swinging and saying, actually, this is what I want as well. So I think we have to just, I think, change our own mindsets. And Mel, you know, you're obviously doing that really well at Blue Cube, but I think it is just around that. We have to think differently now when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to what our workforce is looking like, because the world is different.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mel. Thanks for everybody. No other comments, questions? Just over midday. So I think that's everything. Apologies for dogs. That's the one of the downsides of working from home. The doorbell rings and the 3 dogs go down and go crazy. Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you all for attending. Ami, myself and Claire hope that you all found it useful, interesting, thought-provoking. Maybe some ideas to change into your business. Ami and Claire, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but it's just really a thank you, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
We love doing these. If you've got any suggestions for any future topics that you'd like us to cover, let us know. We'll be catching up again very soon to discuss what we're going to be doing the next one. ABC Live, we'll be sending out the information on that. And thank you for coming. Thank you for your time. I really hope you've had a good start to the year. Have a great Easter, and we'll see you at one of our webinars or at an industry event very, very soon. Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye, guys.